A very good morning, guys. And as Shashank told, I'm Jatin Narula. A quick introduction about myself. So, I'm working as a software engineer at Microsoft, and I have around 1.5 years of experience working in the tech industry. And previously, I was working at Visa. So, there I was part of the data engineering and platform team. So, we were working on various tech stacks, including Spark, Hadoop, you can say. After that, I switched to backend, and then now I'm at Microsoft. So at Microsoft, I'm working in the partner experience team. So what we do is like, so basically, whenever a what you say a partner, I mean, whenever a startup or someone onboards into Azure, right? So we manage the account of that startup or something like that. Okay. So, and there are other things like incentives which we offer. So all those kind of stuff is being managed under the partner experience team. So I'll not waste much of the time in introduction. So let's start. So these are the topics which we are going to cover today. So we're not going to much detail because in the interest of time, but we'll give you an overview of these topics so that you are able to follow up afterwards, and we'll not like bombard you with a lot of tech details, but yeah, it will be an interactive session. So first we are going to talk about what is big data, because a basic understanding of big data is required for Spark. After that, we'll move into topics like horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling. What are the differences between these? And then we'll move into what is Hadoop, and then we'll jump into what is Spark. So Spark is nothing but you can say a extension of Hadoop. Okay. And after that, we'll move into the features of Spark, and then we have sort of a fun section where we'll have a quiz, and it will be an interactive session. You will enjoy a lot. Okay. So, so let's start. So first is what is big data. Okay. Shashank, I'm sharing my screen. I am using dual monitor, so I'm not able to see the chat. If there is any question if anyone wants an immediate answer, you can just remind me, right? I'll just try to do that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So what is big data? First, we'll talk about that. So there are a lot of definitions of big data, but if I have to describe what is big data in simple terms, big data is similar to small data, but it is bigger in size. Okay. And it is growing exponentially. Let me give you an example. So let's say when it is a very layman example, but it will help you understand. Let's say when any company like Uber or Ola, right? Whenever it's new, okay, so it's generating data. So at that time, you can say it's kind of a small data, okay. And as it grows, right? So data also grows exponentially, and the data also grows in volume, and all the 5 V's of data, if you are aware of, right? It grows in volume, it grows in velocity, it grows in velocity, right? So if I have to say what is big data, you can assume that it's a huge data which is growing exponentially. Okay. So that is big data. So it can be the number of likes on Facebook. It can be the ride related data on Uber. It can be movie related data on Netflix. It can be any sort of data like search history on Google. Okay. As long as it's huge, as long as it's exponentially growing, it's referred to as big data. There's not any clear cut definition, but yeah, this you can assume it. Let's just give me a moment. Yeah. So the problem. So let me go into history a bit. So the problem with the traditional computing techniques was they were insufficient to analyze this huge amounts of data. Why? Because initially, let's say you have very less data. Let's say you are doing a machine. You guys are interested in machine learning, right? Let's say you are working on a machine learning project. You have 10,000 rows, let's say, okay, as a sample data. Now, when you have to train that data, so you will be using your laptop resources to train that, okay. So it's not a distributed connected cluster which you are running it on, right? You're just running it on your laptop, and laptop has it has a foundation of resource, right? Let's say you can bump up the RAM to 64 GB. You can bump up your graphic card to, let's say, 10 GB, 16 GB, but after a point, you'll reach a saturation level, right? So and the data is continuously growing. Let's say you have petabytes of data. So it's logically it doesn't make sense, and it's practically infeasible to process this huge amount of data in a given particular laptop, right? So those are the limitations or foundations, I can say, of the traditional computing techniques. That's why those were incapable to analyze big data. And now here comes the interesting part. So the interesting part is the difference between horizontal scaling and vertical scaling, right? So what does big data, how is big data processed? So big data is processed using a cluster of nodes, or by nodes I refer cluster of, you can say, machines. Okay. So there are, let's say you go into a computer lab, right? You see hundreds of machines, right? And let's say all those machines are connected and those machines are used to compute something. Okay. Let's say you fire a program, machine learning model. Let's say you have to do machine learning on 10 GB of data. Now, if you'll do it on your laptop, it will be much slower and it will take a lot of time to train that data. Now, let's say you have made a cluster of nodes on your computer lab and you are firing that data set and you are running that data set on that cluster. So what will happen is all those machines will connect in unison and they will try to, they'll try to compute that data in a distributed form. And then all those, like it is the same concept, right? If you are trying to do something yourself and you are trying to do it as a team, right? Obviously, as a team, will be much faster, right? So that real world example is applicable here also. So all those machines will actually combine together their resources and they will try to compute chunks of data. And then afterwards, what will happen is they'll collate the data and then finally you'll get the result, right? So this is the basic crux how this big data is processed. So there are tons of machines which work together to process this huge amount of data. So let's move on to the next section. So companies using big data to improve their services. So right now, all the companies, whether tech or not all, but most of the companies, whether they are tech or they are non-tech, they are leveraging big data to improve their services by direct means or indirect means. Facebook, Netflix, Uber, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, everyone is using big data, and like big data is a new thing, right? So that's why. So basically, it gives you insights into the customer behavior. For example, let me take example of Amazon. Okay, so Amazon is using it for various things, but two things which come to my mind are advertising algorithms and customer relations. So basically, it's using that data to give you user-specific advertisements, right? So let's say you want to buy a mouse, right? So you will get a suggestion in your suggestion that, okay, you might consider this keyboard or might consider this other mouse, which is like comparable to the mouse which you are buying, something like that, right? I hope you're getting a feel of it, right? Yeah. Now let's move on to okay, let me give you one more example. Customer relations, right? So whenever you open a chat, whenever you talk to a customer service agent in Amazon, so what happens is sometimes you see that he already knows some basic info about you, or a chatbot opens up. He says, okay, do you want to talk to the customer service agent regarding this product, right? So they are actually leveraging the data, or they are using simple models to basically get insights. Okay, what do you want? And they are trying to ask you, okay, is this you want? So how does this help? This helps to save time and efforts on the customer agent side, right? Because computer itself is trying to predict something and trying to do the manual work which otherwise the agent has to do, right? So this is how big data is used, and big data is very, very powerful in terms of machine learning as well. It can help you predict various things which are like very difficult to do, right? And they are highly, highly useful. Let's move on to another example. Let's take the example of Netflix, right? So Netflix is also using big data for movie suggestions, right? For example, let's say you're watching some movie of some genre, right? And let's say you're watching what was that? Which I was watching? Yeah, Money Heist, right? Yeah. So I was watching Money Heist recently. So what it does is it looks into your history and looks into let's say you're watching Money Heist, so it looks into the kind of movies that you like, right? And it will automatically, next time you log in or in the suggestions pane, it will automatically suggest you, okay, these are the movies which you might be interested in watching, right? All those kind of things, predictions mostly, right? Facebook, you all know. So Facebook, how Facebook is leveraging this kind of stuff is it basically in Facebook and Google, you see, like in Google Photos especially, you see those stories appearing 1 year back, or you might rediscover your past, something like that happens, right? So all this is using that kind, like the data which Google has collected, right? So those things are very interesting, right? So this opens up a lot of opportunities and a lot of interesting use cases, right? And this is still growing actually. So this is the power of big data. So So is my audio clear, right? I'll just prompt in between so that I'm like we both are on the same page. Shashank, is the audio clear?
Yeah, it's very loud and clear.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Uh, okay, let's move on to the next section. So this is a very important basic concept. Okay, every time, so this is used many times in system design and all. So basically, this is the comparison of horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling. So what do I mean by horizontal scaling? Okay, so uh, let me give you an example. So let's say you go to a computer shop, okay? You buy a laptop, okay? Let's say you have you have a lot, you have a very high budget, right? You tell the shopkeeper, okay, I can buy, you give me the most powerful laptop, whatever you have. Okay, he gives you a Alienware laptop. It has 64 GB RAM. It has 16 GB of graphic card. It has SSD. It has HDD. It has everything. It has a very beautiful display. Everything. Right? You come home very happy, and then you basically playing games on it. Everything you are doing right, and you have, let's say you are let me give you you are, let's say, doing some machine learning on that. And what happens is, let's say you kept a glass of water close to your laptop and it falls on your laptop. Your laptop is destroyed, right? So this is, so basically what happens is, this is something related to fault tolerance. Now let's say your laptop is destroyed, so all your resources are destroyed at that point. Now you can't do anything. Now let's take another example. Let's say you go to the shopkeeper, you say, give me 4 laptops of less specifications, but I need 4 laptops. You buy 4 Lenovo laptops and you keep them side by side. You're doing a machine learning on those 4 laptops. Now let's say again let's say water spills up on one of the laptop, but still you have 3 laptops with you, right? Which can still help you do basic tasks. It is not like you're completely destroyed, right? So there the concept of fault tolerance comes up, and which is very important in horizontal scaling. Okay, there's a spelling mistake I noticed, but yeah, it's fine. So that is the advantage of horizontal scaling over vertical scaling. So now let me get to the exact definition. So as it reads out, horizontal scaling means that you scale by adding more machines into your pool of resources, whereas vertical scaling means that you scale by adding more power to an existing machine. So as I gave you the example, right? So basically you are building a CPU or you're building a machine which is more powerful in itself rather than having 10 different systems which are less powerful by themselves but more powerful collectively, right? So let's say, what are the advantages of this? So in horizontal scaling, right, if you have to increase resources, you just have to add more machines. Let's say you have, let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, this one. So let's say you have to increase resources. So how you can do it? You have to add more machines, right? You just have to add, let's say, 3 more computers, 4 more computers, like that, right? So that cluster will grow in itself. And it is fault tolerant because even if one system goes down, you have other, let's say you have a cluster of 12 CPUs. Let's say one node goes down, you have other 11 nodes to help you out with, right? And in vertical scaling, what happens? You just increase the resources of one particular machine. So it also has its own advantages and disadvantages. For example, increasing, so by horizontal, the disadvantage of horizontal scaling is it involves a lot of work on the network IO side because because these resources, these computers needs to sync up with each other, right? So that is an additional cost on the software side or on the development side, right? You need to make a unison between these, right? You need to make them into a cluster. So that is an additional work which you need to do, but that usually pays off. And in vertical scaling, you need not do that because you have one machine, right? So you need not bother it communicating with 10 different machines. Into that part of work goes away in vertical scaling, but most of the cases, horizontal scaling is the way to go. Okay. So I hope this is clear, right? Can you do some can you put some prompts in the chat like yes, something like that? Is this concept clear? Shashank, can you help me out with chat, right? Are people responding yes or no? Because I'm not able to see.
Yep. I'm getting responses like yes.
Okay. So if I have to summarize this, yeah, I'm getting the responses. Shavi is told yes. Yeah, okay. So if I have to summarize this, horizontal scaling means that you have to add more resources into your cluster of cluster, and vertical scaling means you have to increase the power of one particular computer. Okay. Let's move on to the next section. So this was the kind of, okay. Sure. Now we come to the interesting part, right? So these are the fundamental. So right now, what we have covered are the fundamental principles of how to process big data. So how to process big data is you need a cluster of system, because one system might reach to a saturation level, after which you might not be able to increase the vertical scaling by much, right? So you have to move into the horizontal scaling part. So now let's understand what is Hadoop. So Hadoop is an open source, you can say open source kind of a thing. So Hadoop processes large data across multiple nodes. So when I was talking about how these resources in the horizontal scaling part, the difficult part is how these resources communicate with each other. So Hadoop fills up that gap to help you communicate, help the different resources, different nodes communicate with each other, right? So to you, so how it helps you is, let's say you are a developer, to you it will be like you are communicating with a single machine. But on the backend side, Hadoop will take care of how it is communicating, how it is connecting different machines, and how it is processing, how it is helping process your data, and it will return to your result as if. So for you, it's an abstraction. For you, it is like you are looking into a single machine, you're logging into a single computer and doing things. But on the backend side, Hadoop is taking care, okay, how it is managing that cluster and all. That is the beauty of Hadoop. So in Hadoop, there are a lot of things, but with the interest of time, so we'll just cover the basic fundamentals of Hadoop. And if you are interested, I'll help you out with the resources in the end, which you can deep dive and look into, right? So let's look into the two basic concepts of Hadoop, which are the HDFS and MapReduce. Okay, let me go into this slide here. So this is a very, very, very high level architecture of Hadoop, which I've done. It's not even an architecture, it's just a basic, like it will help you understand the core concept, right? Which is the most important thing. So as I told you, let's say you are someone who is doing, you are someone who is, you want to run some tasks. Let's say you want to run a C program. So it's a very layman example. It's not something that you do on Hadoop, but it will help you understand. Let's say you're running a C program, which is taking a lot of time to compute. So what you do is you give your C program as your input and you want some output from it. Let's say hello world. Okay, after some heavy computation, you want hello world. What you will do is you log into your system. You'll write your C program and you'll submit it to the Hadoop cluster. Okay. Now that cluster, the job of that cluster is to compute and do all sorts of computation on that, right? And it finally give you the output. So how it does it in Hadoop is there are a cluster of nodes, which you can see, the 4 dots, which are the 4 circles which I made, right? So what Hadoop will do is it will take the input, it will store it into some HDFS. What is HDFS? HDFS is Hadoop Distributed File System. So let's say, let me give you an example. Let's say you have your hard disk, right, where you store data, right? So HDFS, you can say some sort of a file system, okay, like directories are there, all those, like it's a very layman example again, but it's not how it happens actually, but it will help you understand again. So think of it as a structure, like you make a folder, like say study, and inside that you make subjects like that, right? So it will store that data into its own file structure, file system, and then basically the node will read the data from it. It will do some computation. All the nodes will do some computation, and while doing that computation, they might need to store some temporary data, right? That also it stores in HDFS. After that computation is done, all the results are collected, and then finally they are merged into one and then sent to you as output. Okay. So again, let me move back to the previous slide. So now what is HDFS? HDFS is nothing but a file system which Hadoop uses to store data, which you give to Hadoop to process. It also stores some temporary data into it, which it might need to store temporarily while processing that your data. Okay, so 2 things it stores. Apart from that, there are various other things, but right for now, you need to focus on only these 2 things. So these 2 things are clear, right? So can you just prompt on the chat whether it's clear or not? What is HDFS? Then we'll move to MapReduce. Shashank, we are getting responses, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Asha, Bhavna, yes. Okay, cool. Sarah also said yes. Okay. So HDFS is clear, right? Now let's move on to MapReduce. Okay. So as I told you, like data is read from the HDFS and then it is processed in the nodes, and then basically it gets collected and sent to you as output. So how it is, like the data is read by multiple nodes, right? So you can call that phase as map phase. So it is being mapped to different nodes. Okay, and inside that also it undergoes various other things like shuffling, sorting. We're not going into that detail, but what happens is it's mapped to different nodes, right? So that is the map phase, and finally what happens? There is one node. Uh, there is one node which collects all this data and sends to you. Let me take an example. Let's say your use cases, there is a paragraph, right? There is a paragraph and you have to return me the frequency of all the words. Let's say how many times the is occurring in that paragraph, how many times there is occurring in that paragraph, and how many times, let's say, it is occurring in that paragraph. Let's say 10 times the is occurring. You need that result, right? You need to compute that. It's a very huge paragraph. So how this will happen is you'll send that paragraph as input with your code. Logic you have to write. Logic is not the part of Hadoop, right? Logic you have to write. Hadoop's only job is to compute that. Hadoop will break it down into different tasks. So that is the map phase. Okay. So let's say some node is let's say 3 nodes are computing 2 nodes are computing it. 3 nodes are again computing there. Something like that, right? Afterwards, what will happen is there will be one node that will collect all this data from, let's say, the nodes who are computing the frequency of the nodes who is computing the frequency of it, and the nodes who are computing the frequency of there. Okay. It will collect all this data, it will merge it into one array, and it will send to you as answer. Okay, the frequency of the is this, the frequency of it is this, the frequency of there is this, like that. So what the reduce phase does is it reduces don't call it like it actually reduces, but it's not like it's cutting down something. Understand it like it is collecting all the data from different nodes and merging it into one complete output which is relevant to you. If I give you an output, like because the data is broken down into different chunks, right? But you as a user expect it to give you a complete result, right? You not expect, okay, I am getting only the frequency of I want frequency of all the words, right? So obviously someone has to collect these from all the nodes and give it to you. So that is the reduce phase, the collection of different results and giving it to you. So that is the reduce phase. The map phase is distributing it into different chunks of data and processing it there. And the reduce phase is to collect that again back and give it to you. Is the reduce phase clear? And map reduce, the fundamentals of map reduce clear? Again, can you just tell me in the chat? Okay, Shubhangi is saying yes, Shivani is saying yes. Okay, you guys are smart here, so nice. It's actually very difficult to understand like if I move into the architecture, it will be very difficult. So this is the main fundamental. If you understand this, it will be a lot easier for you to follow up, right? So yeah, if you don't understand, just ask, right? I'll explain again, not an issue. Okay, so so this is the sort of a high level architecture again. I'll go a little quicker because we need to cover some more things. So let me give you an example here again. Okay. You need one more example of map reduce, right? Okay. Yeah, I was going to that. Okay. Now let me pick this up. Let me give you a real world example. Now you guys are staying in quarantine, right? Let's say you want to eat something very nice. Let's say you ask your mother to cook some butter chicken for you. Okay. So it's a very layman example again, but you'll understand the fundamentals. Okay. So let's say you want to eat some butter chicken or if you're veg, some paneer dish, okay, something like that. Okay, you tell your mother, okay, mama, I want to eat this. Okay, so what your mom says, okay, I'm not going to do everything. Okay, so that is, your mom is actually the master or the name node here. Okay, so your mom says, okay, I'm not going to do everything. She tells you to bring, bring the vegetables. She tells your brother to bring the spices. She tells your father to heat up the stove, and like that she assigns tasks to different people. Okay, and finally and like this she assigns the task, and so what you do is your job is to fetch the vegetables, right? So your job is abstracted to fetching the vegetables. So let's say you are node 1. These are the slave nodes or the data nodes. You are the node 1, so your job is to fetch the vegetables. So you are going to fetch the vegetables now. Your father's job is to heat up the stove. Your father is going to heat up the stove now. Your brother is going to fetch the spices now. So like that, your mother has assigned tasks to different people, right? So, and afterwards, what your mother will do, your mother will actually combine all those things and give you the output, which is your dish which you wanted to eat, right? Now, is this clear, this fundamental? So what is map phase is like, you can assume it to, you can think of it as like distributing it to different people to do the job, and reduce is like collecting the result from them and giving it back to the user or the client app in this side. Okay. Now, let me give you some some technique. Now now I think it's the right time to move into some technical details. So name node, actually, what is name node? Name node is the master node. In this case, it was your mother whose job is to actually coordinate different data nodes, which was your brother, you, and your father, right? In this example. So she is coordinating, okay, you need to do this, you need to do this. She is giving you the job assignments, right? So in Hadoop also, it happens that name node is actually the one who is coordinating these data nodes. So data nodes are the one who is doing the processing, but the name node is actually what you call it, managing the relationship between these. And how it does it? It stores that metadata. By metadata, I mean to which node I am assigning this task, to which like your mother will think, okay, I have assigned heating the stove activity to your father. So that will be stored in your mother's brain, right? So that is how the task is stored in your name node. So So metadata is actually nothing but where the data is getting stored. Obviously, for resilience and for fault tolerance, this data is copied into different replicas. Let's say if I am asked to bring the vegetables, and if let's say I meet with some accident, I have met with an accident, right? So obviously that butter chicken can't be made. So in real world, how it happens is not in real world, in Hadoop, how it happens is basically you have that copy of data maintained, right? So that data is actually maintained in 3 or 4 different nodes. Let's say if Hadoop has to process some data X, it will keep a copy of this X in, let's say, 3 different places. So that even if one node goes down, it has 2 copies, right? Just for fault tolerance, right? And you can see how it exchanges the data from HDFS, right? It's there visible in this, right? So all this kind of stuff happens. So is this part clear, right? Overview, like, are you getting a feel of it, how it happens, right? Need not go into detail because of the interest of time. You can after look into different videos on Spark. We'll talk more about Spark. So what we have learned till now, we have learned what is big data. So big data is nothing but small data which has grown big and which is still growing exponentially, right? Now, how are companies using it? We saw different examples of Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all the companies. And apart from that, even some non-technical companies like Starbucks and all are using. If you read into these cases, right, how they're using, so they're pretty interesting, right? It's not like only technical companies are leveraging this big data. Many companies, customer-facing companies are leveraging it. After that, we moved into Hadoop. What is Hadoop? How it processes data. We looked into horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling. And we also covered the high-level architecture of Hadoop. What is a name node? What is a data node? Name node is basically a node which coordinates the different jobs which data node do. So data nodes are the people who are actually processing the data, right? So all this is covered. Let's move on to the next section, which is Spark. So what is Spark? Okay, Spark is again an open source Apache framework. So Apache framework, general purpose distributed data processing engine. So again, it's a distributed data processing engine. Everything is mostly similar. So why I covered Hadoop and MapReduce previously is because not everything, but most of the things are very similar to that. The difference between Spark and MapReduce, so actually Spark is a kind of a substitute to MapReduce, you can say. So the difference between these both is mostly performance and some other. So the difference between easy to process the data, right, which help you in processing the data. So it's a Spark processing engine. So the keyword here is distributed data processing, right? So it again distributes the data and processes it, and again collects the data and gives it back to you, right? Let's move on to the next slide. So what are the features of Spark? So if you Google, right, why is Spark better than MapReduce and why should I use Spark, right? So everywhere you see that Spark is 100 times faster than MapReduce, something like that it will be written. So I'm not sure about the number because frankly speaking, I've worked on Spark, but I haven't seen it to be 100 times fast, but maybe I was not working on the correct configuration or something, but it is faster. It is comparatively faster than MapReduce. So the reason being, reason being it's an in-memory computation, right? It uses in-memory computation. What do I mean by in-memory computation? Okay, now this is very important to understand. Okay, just like Pay attention for this one. So how I told you how MapReduce works, right? You give an input. Let's see Hadoop MapReduce. It is written data sharing on disk. So how it works is you give an input. It is read from the HDFS. It again process. Let's say you are doing something, right? So you have given an input. It will be read from HDFS. Okay, and then some node will process that data. Now let's say some other node needs that data, so it will store it as a temporary data in HDFS again, and the next node will read from that HDFS, right? So there will be multiple reads and writes from the HDFS, right? Let's say 3 nodes are working on it, so one node will read and it will write, and then that write for that node 1 will be the output, will be the input for the node 2. So like that in series, this job will happen for some case. Like it will be a little bit more complex, but let's assume there are 3 nodes which are processing data, and one node is expecting the data from the other node. So obviously, first that other node will write that data to HDFS, then that node will read it from there, right? So there will be multiple reads and writes from HDFS. So this is actually what slows down MapReduce, right? How if your particular application is doing a lot of reads and writes from HDFS, it will be very slow, right? Because this read and write is done on disk in MapReduce. By disk, I mean you can think of it as like hard disk, basically. Okay. So that's why it actually. Okay. Manisha is asking me to go slow. Okay. So I need to go slow. Okay. So okay. Again. So I'll have a second. Okay. So yeah. So let's say you have given your input, okay, and it is read from, let's say you are again, let's take an example, and read from the disk. Okay, it's read from it is stored in HDFS, and then it is read from the disk. Okay, then let's say you are doing some processing. Let's say first you need to sort the data. You have sorted the data in node 1. Again, it will be written to the HDFS. Now that sorted array is written. Now there will be some node which needs to operate on that sorted array. It will again read from that HDFS sorted array, right? It will again read from HDFS. Now on that sorted array, it has done something like removed unique elements. Okay. Again, it will write to HDFS. Now another node will again read from that unique elements array and do something. So are you able to follow up that there will be multiple reads and writes from the disk, which is the HDFS? Is this clear? Can you just give me yes? Or if it is not clear, no. This fundamental is clear, right?
Yep.
So Rashi is saying yes. Shubhangi is also saying yes. Okay, Manisha also yes. Okay, fine, nice. So this thing is clear that, so now we are on the same page that there will be multiple reads and writes from HDFS, right? Now the next thing is in Spark, how this is beneficial is Spark, instead of using the disk to store, it uses memory instead of disk, right? As it is, let's speed up the processing by using memory instead of disk. Memory, you can think of it as RAM. Okay. Anything on RAM will be much faster than, you know that hierarchy, right? Cache is fast, then RAM is fast, and after that disk comes, like that, right? So anything on RAM will be much faster. Even if you take the example of your cell phone, right? Let me give you an example of cell phone. On the cell phone, if you see, right, when you open a recent apps, you see all the apps which you have opened recently, right? So all those apps which you see there are loaded on the RAM, right? Basically, so whenever you open a recently opened RAM app, it automatically pops up from the state where you left it, right? Let's say you were scrolling on Instagram, you were at a particular page on Instagram or a particular person's ID, and you leave it in background. You open it after 5 times, it again pops up from that particular state, right? So those things are stored on RAM, and RAM is actually much faster than disk. So Spark leverages this concept, right? It stores the intermediate data or the data on the memory or the RAM instead of the disk. So that is the advantage of Spark. So that is the main advantage. There are other optimizations also which it does, but the core concept is it uses in-memory computation. Now if someone will say, okay, my hard disk is of 1 TB, okay, and my RAM is of, let's say, 8 GB or 16 GB. So how can I process this 1 TB of data on 16 GB, right? Because RAM has a particular, because RAM is not huge, right? RAM, you can't have 1 TB of RAM, obviously, right? So how Spark does it, it breaks it. Again, the data is broken down. 16 GB of data will be processed on RAM, and whatever the extra data is and whatever the data is left, either it will be processed in the next batch or it will be spilled to disk. So it has a preference like that. Okay, first I'll use memory to process. If I'm not able to process, I will spill this data to disk and I'll keep it there. Okay. So first it tries to run it on memory. If it is not possible, then it goes into disk, right? So that's why like it is little faster. There are other things like lazy computation, all those things which we'll cover in the interest of time. We'll see. So is this thing clear? Why Spark is actually better than MapReduce? Shivani is saying yes. Okay. Yes, Sarah, yes. Okay, fine. I'm moving forward. So, ease of use. Okay. So, Spark is little easier to use than MapReduce. Why? Because it has a rich set of APIs. By APIs, I mean, it has a lot of, you can say it is from the coding point of view, right? Firstly, you can use many languages to code it in. You can use Java, you can use Scala, although Java is little tricky. So, similarly, for this Spark, right, the fundamental unit is RDD, we call it, Resilient Distributed Data Set. So I'll be referring to it as RDD. Okay. Don't be scared of this name. Actually, it's nothing but a data structure which Spark uses. Let me give you an example. So the guys who are doing Python, right, they might have seen those data frames in Pandas, right? It's like similar to that. You can say RDDs are nothing but it's a basic building block of Spark, right? Let's take an example again. Let's say you have a table, right, from which you need to read something. Okay. A table from which you need to read something. So let's say in code, if you read it, right, so that table will be mapped to an RDD as a data structure, right? So after that, if you do something, let's say change this particular column. So how it will happen is RDDs are immutable. So this is very important. Like strings are immutable, right? RDDs are immutable. So what will happen is whenever you do any operation on RDD, it will actually, let's say you read a table from your Spark and it comes to you as an RDD. So that let's say you read a print, right, it comes to you as an integer, right? Similarly, if you read something from Spark, it comes to you as RDD. Okay? Assume it to be a data type. Although this statement is wrong, but assume it to be a data type right now. You get an RDD type data, right, as a table. Now you do some operation on it. Let's say you change a particular column. Give you a new RDD with the particular changes. Okay. Is this clear? RDDs never change, right? Whatever operation you do on that, it actually transforms it and gives you a new RDD. Is this clear? Can we have some yeses and nos, please? Okay, Divyanshu said, yep. Shivani also, Manisha, yeah. So, Surbi also said yes. Okay, nice. So, let's move on to the another important concept, that is lazy evaluation. So, this is another characteristic feature of Spark. Lazy evaluation. How does this thing, what is this thing first? Okay. So let's say you have a table. You have to do 10 operations on it. You have to modify column 1. You have to rename your name from column 2. You have to calculate this. Let's say you have to do something, right, on these things, some operations. So what Spark does is it actually creates a roadmap side kind of thing. Okay. It creates a checklist, you can say. Okay. So let's take a real world example. Your mom gives you 10 items to buy. Okay, so make a checklist. Okay, I have to buy eggs, I have to buy bread, I have to buy vegetables, I have to buy let's say oil, something like that. You make a checklist, but till your mom will say, okay, go to the market and bring these to me, you'll not go, right? You'll just make that checklist and you'll sit there. Your mom has instructed you, okay, I need these things. You'll make a checklist, but when your mom will tell you to go to the market and bring, then only you'll go, right? Obviously. You'll work on a lazy principle. Like let's say you're lying down on your bed, you'll not go to the market till your mom says, okay, go to the market. Okay. Some people I know, they are very good, but they'll go, but assume like you're lazy. Okay. So, So this is how RDDs also work. You tell it to do something. Let's say you give it an operation map. Okay, change these columns. Do this. It will not do until you give it an action. So actions are different functions. Like here it is written, right? Save as text file, reduce. Until you give it an action, it will not execute those. It will just make a checklist. I need to do this. Till it has some interaction with the user or till it needs to do that, it will not do. Okay. This is how this thing works. Is this thing clear? This is very difficult to understand. If this thing is clear, like if you can say yes or no, it will give me it will give me a thing like, are you able to follow up or not? Is this thing clear? Like how it is lazy evaluation? How this thing works, this lazy evaluation? Can we get some yeses and nos? Yes. Okay, I'll again summarize it for those people who might not get it. So RDDs are nothing but basically you read it from RDD. Lazy evaluation is nothing but you read basically you give 10 operations to Spark to do this on RDD. It will make a checklist. What it will do is it will until you tell it to do that, it will not do. It will just make a checklist. It will make a map sort. It will make a graph sort of a thing. Okay, this is a node. It will make a directed graph. Okay, I need to do this. I need to do this. And finally, when you tell, okay, I need this, then it will actually execute it from scratch and do that and give it to you. So that is the concept of lazy evaluation. I would like you guys to look into this in more detail and Google it. Right? Just note it down. Let's move on to the next section. So let me see how much we have. Okay. I'll cover the next section in a little bit quicker, and after that we'll have the fun part. Okay. So Shashank, we'll have the Q&A on the go. So I think so if we have any important questions, we'll cater it in the next last 5 minutes. Is that fine?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if any questions pops up related to a particular slide, you can ask me. Like you can point it out. I can answer it there itself. Right. So
All right.
that will be better, I think. Yeah. Okay. So Spark SQL, right? Okay, let's talk about. So these are different things which Spark offers you, right? How ease of use I was talking about it. These are different things which Spark offers you. First is the Spark SQL. Now let's say whenever you have to access some data from a database, right? What you do is you write a SQL query, right? So this property of writing a SQL query, this Spark also gives you on a particular table stored in Spark, right? Not stored in Spark for big data. So for big data, this thing is little complex, right? See, a table will be there, obviously, but since it's a distributed system, accessing that table is not as easy as accessing it from a particular machine, right? So Spark SQL, what it does, it gives you an abstraction. Okay, it gives you an envelope. Okay, you just give me the SQL query. How it is processing data from this table, I'll take care of. Okay, whether it's distributed in nodes or not, that is my headache. You just give me the query. I'll convert it into a Spark job. I'll convert it into RDD, what Spark understands, and it's my job. Okay, you just have to focus on writing the SQL query. So if this was not there, even writing a select star something from Spark would have, like you have to imagine you have to write a C program to access a data from a table. You understand it will be little difficult and challenging for you, right? So that is the help which SQL gives you for your case, right? So similarly, Spark gives you this advantage when you have to access a table in big data. Is this thing clear? It is nothing but a SQL language for big data. Okay, I'm going forward. So we discussed many features of Spark. These are the other features. So I'm not going into much detail. So since Spark is I'll just cover these in one line or two. Since Spark is very fast, so it does real-time processing, right? It's helpful in doing real-time processing. Let's say you have to do some real-time processing. You have a stream of data coming and you need to update some dashboard or some graph simultaneously with very less latency, right? So Spark helps you in doing that because Spark is very fast, firstly. And it's a real-time, it's not a batch processing system like MapReduce. So I'm not going into what is a batch processing system and all. Just try to Google it afterwards. It just understand that Spark is very fast. So it helps us in real-time processing with very less latency. It's compatible with Hadoop also, so that people who are currently working on MapReduce and Hadoop, they can use Spark to improve the performance of their application, because Spark came afterwards, right? So you need an easy migration from MapReduce to Spark, right? Otherwise, it will be very difficult. Why would some company who has made a complete architecture on Hadoop, why would it switch to Spark on MapReduce? Why would it switch to Spark, right? So you need that transition. So that is also very easy. And in-memory computation we talked about. Flexibility, yeah, it is flexible, like in the sense like you have many choices of languages. You can do machine learning in it with the help of Scala, although Python is preferred. But yeah, you have choices. You have the flexibility with you. It is fast processing system. Right? So yeah, this is another important aspect of Spark. So right now you guys are in college, right? So what you guys would be doing is you might have done some machine learning stuff, right? So you are doing it on one system, but actually that's not the use case, right? Machine learning is done on a very large data set. You might be handling 10,000 rows, 20,000, even 1 million rows. But if you have petabytes of data, then you have to train that on a machine learning platform that is fast. You can't do that on your system, right? It will crash. So in that case, also Spark is used. If you have to do machine learning on a distributed system, Spark gives you that functionality. And it does its best job to make you feel that you are doing it on a single machine. So for you, it will be like you're doing it on a single machine, but on the backend, Spark will actually distribute and do all the good stuff of computing it on a distributed machine, right? So this was Spark ML. Now we have some time. So 7 minutes. Okay. Let's have a fun quiz kind of section, right? So we talked about various things. After that, I'll summarize, obviously. So just to like, it's a Sunday morning, right? I don't want to bombard you guys with some lot of technical details. So let's end it on a good note. Okay. So I'll explain you what are these quizzes and how can you answer. Okay. So Shashank, I need some help from you on this. So yeah. So how this will go is so this is a logo of a particular you can say a particular technology in Hadoop. Okay. So you have to tell me what this technology is. I'll give you some hints. And I'll give you hints. You can Google. So let's see who has good Googling skills. So I'll give you that hint. So you can search on Google and you can prompt it on the chat. You can write it down on the chat and Shashank can tell me who was the first one. I'll call out the name. Okay. Sounds good, Shashank, right?
Yep. Guys, quick.
Yeah. Be quick, guys. So,
yeah, we got the answer from Mayank Shah. He was the first one.
Oh, Mayank is too quick. I think he used that Google Lens to scan the image or something. So, yeah. So, no, it's not MapReduce, Sarah. Okay, guys, not Hadoop. I'll give a hint. Okay. So this is a SQL processing kind, like I told you, Spark SQL, right? This is a SQL processing engine for, you can say, Hadoop MapReduce. If you Google that, I think you'll get the answer. So HQL, it's called HQL. It's Hive. Yeah, this is Hive actually. So what is Hive? Hive is like a SQL query language for Hadoop for MapReduce. Like Spark SQL was for Spark, Hive is similarly for Hadoop. This is a kind of a bee and elephant mixed kind of logo which they have. So yeah, most of the Hadoop logos are pretty interesting to watch. So that's why. So now we have a beautiful eye kind of thing, right? So just tell me what logo is this. I'll give you a hint. So this is a distributed NoSQL database, if you can search. So it's a distributed NoSQL database, which was founded by Facebook, I think. If I'm right, it was founded by Facebook, but now I think it's open source. So let's see who can. Its name starts from C. Yeah, Shivani, I think. Who got it first, Shashank?
Haven't received any answer yet.
I think I saw Shivani's answer pop
up. Maybe.
Shivani, okay. Shivani.
Yeah, we
Shavi,
got it
Cassandra.
from Shavi. Yeah, Cassandra. That's right.
Yeah, so this is Cassandra, that's right. So this is a database, NoSQL distributed database, you can say. It has a lot of properties. It's a very interesting thing. Like I'll suggest you guys to look into this, Cassandra. Right? Like it uses many distributed system concepts. If you guys are interested in distributed systems, how actually they are fault tolerant and all those kind of things, consistent hashing. Like they are very interesting things, right, of system design. So you can look into this one.
First question from Vishal K. Is the MapReduce actually delegating the tasks on big data to multiple nodes?
Not exactly. MapReduce is the process of doing that, right? Delegation is done by a process which runs in NameNode, you can say. I'm not going into much details, but it is, you can say sort of it is done by the master node. Okay, who delegates it? Like the mother and son example I gave, right? So the node is actually delegating it. The process is actually called MapReduce. It's a process. I hope that justifies it, right?
Okay, thanks, Jatin. We have another question from Shubhangi Thakur. She wants to know, is there anything which is better than Hadoop and Spark?
There are various things like, so right now Spark and Hadoop are the go-to things right now. Most of the things are working, most of the distributed clusters are on that only. I think there are different, you can say add-ons on that. Like there is a Tez processing engine, which is like Tez, its name is PEZ. Okay. So it also uses some things to increase the performance. Those things are there. But most of at least what I'm aware of, Spark and Hadoop are the go-to things right now.
Okay, Jatin. So we have next question from Ravinder Shokhal. HDFS is on every machine with smaller data? Question mark. If so, then IO network is used in read and write from HDFS.
So HDFS is sort of a logical partition. So I gave you an example of hard disk so that it's easy for you to understand. It's sort of a logical partition, mounting kind of stuff. If you know, I'm not going into much detail again. It's a logical partition. So you can say it's like a. How can I explain? Can you repeat the question again, Shashank?
He's saying HDFS is on every machine with smaller data set, right? So if so, he's asking basically. If so, then IO network is used in read and write from HDFS.
Yeah, obviously, if you read and write, that IO network will obviously be used, and it is also distributed, right? That HDFS is also in the name itself. It says Hadoop distributed, right? So it's also distributed. It will, because if it's on one machine, right? Again, the fault tolerance thing will come up, right? So again, it's distributed, and it does that network IO and all those input and output operations to read and write from that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jatin. So we have one last question that looks like some interesting one as well. So the question is from Sovan Roy. He is asking, how much big is the data in big data? If I write a particular number like 10 to the power 9 in everywhere of the globe, then is it a big data? Please explain.
So that's an interesting question. So, okay, so there are two things. So there are a lot of definitions of big data, but what I feel is it's a very subjective term. By subjective, I mean it depends. It has no clear-cut definition. Okay, when you cross 10 GB, then it will be called as big data. At least I am not aware of that. So it is called big data if it is big enough. If you cannot handle it, let's take it this way. If you cannot handle it on the most powerful single machine, okay, and you have to do horizontal scaling, right? At that point, it becomes big data. Okay. Firstly, this. Secondly, it should be growing. It should not be static. It should not be like you have 1 petabyte of data, but it will remain 1 petabyte even after 10 years. So that is the velocity part of thing, right? It should flow. It should be exponentially growing also. I hope that. So if you ask me the definition of big data, if you are able to store that 10 to the power 9, at least from my understanding, if you're able to store that 10 to the power 9 thing in a single machine if you can build a single machine and store that and do that computation on a single machine, then I think it's not a big data for you. It will be big data once you have to have that horizontal scaling. I hope that answers your question.
Yep. Thanks, Jatin. I guess like the chat box in private section is getting flooded with the question, but I guess we have to move on another session. But I tried my best to cover up the most generic questions. And at last, I would like to thank Jatin for taking your time out for this session. And I hope all the attendees would find it really useful to get the taste of like how Spark and cluster computing works. So yep, thanks a lot, Jatin, for your time.
Yep, thanks, Shashank, and thank you guys for joining, especially Sunday morning. So few updates from my side. If you want to get connected with me, I also have